Welcome to FMS 5 on 5. Today I'm sitting down with FMS co-founder Gray Cook to talk about his new series, Gray on Gray, and to pick his brain a little bit about what's coming up around the bend in 2018 for FMS. The trick to this interview is that Gray is going to try to keep his answers to 60 seconds or less. So, are you ready for it, Gray?
I can do that if I hold the timer.
Your books are loaded with quotes, anywhere from ancient philosophers to current thought leaders in any industry, really. Interestingly enough, you are quoted oftentimes not only in the fitness, healthcare, and performance industry, but also with other thought leaders in other industries. So based on that, give us the background about Gray on Gray and what your thought was behind that.
Quotes have always been very special to me because it's just a brief chain of words that, like a key to a lock, opens up a lot of different thoughts. And I think a well-constructed quote is short and brief, but it not only makes you think, there are layers to that thought, and so you could open up an entire conversation or sort of self-evaluation by applying that quote to a lot of different things. So I looked at philosophy and science and some of the pearls that we get from there and said, a lot of those pearls aren't being applied where I work. We're very short-sighted, we're very myopic, and we do a thing called confirmation bias, which means we find exactly what we're looking for and miss everything we're not. So
FMS has grown tremendously since it started 30 years ago. With that said, it's grown not only to be a global company, but also in its course offerings. So it started with the screen and then has moved on to healthcare professionals with the SFMA and performance professionals with the FCS. Interestingly, though, we are taking it back to the basics in 2018 at FMS, really by studying the simplicity of movement and just movement in general, and then with the new courses that we have coming up. And you are walking that walk by getting back into the trenches as an instructor. Tell us about that, how that started with the FCS courses, of you wanting to teach those.
Well, it follows the trend. The FMS, the concept was just a bunch of us in a small clinic trying to think outside the box. I took the lead on that. I clipped on the mic and I tried to start telling the world, and as other guys in the group were able to teach it as well as myself, I moved on over to the SFMA. From the SFMA, I realized I had to become the author and put it down in movement while everybody else was doing the live experience. FCS sort of, all right, how would we approach fitness differently? If this is the way we approach medical movement and function differently, how would we approach fitness differently? Because it's still a problem. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm going to deal with that, I want to be right there at the experience. I want to be right there when it hits you in the face so I can gauge those behaviors and maybe change those perceptions. And so being in the trenches helps me do that.
So tell us some stories or a story about your experience in the trenches and an FCS course.
The stories are actually all the same. They just have different faces and backgrounds and geographic locations. And so a lot of how we feel personally makes it into our profession. So let's make sure what we feel about fitness and movement health fits with our own paradigm, because we see a lot of people that don't walk the walk. And so you walk into that thing, you're doing movement screens on each other right away, so we know how well you move before we ask you how fit you are. And we don't ask you how fit you are in a survey. We measure how fit you are in really elemental qualities. But watching people realize that a third of the room has fitness problems, 2/3 of the room has functional problems. And what I'm really inspired by is the solution to a lot of these problems isn't a month of programming or a different piece of equipment. It's exposure. It's an experience. And I get to teach FCS once a week in our local elementary school because it's physical education for adults or not.
So what can attendees expect to take away from the movement experience?
I think they're going to realize that their opportunities are far greater than they thought. We realize that many people coming to our workshops have financial constraints, square footage constraints, or whatever. And what Lee and I have always tried to do is show you how to do more with less, meaning there is a lot more potential in whatever experience you're trying to create with movement than you're currently thinking. And I think one of the reasons is because we think we have to teach people how to move. We don't. We've got to expose them to physical obstacles that are scaled in such a way that they learn to self-regulate and appreciate without words and pictures through movement and feel. And one of the things that I got reinvigorated with teaching kids a lot of this stuff is I don't have to correct their movement. I just have to expose them to an obstacle. They climb over or crawl under, and some kids will do good and some kids won't, but they pattern each other, so by the time I'm ready to instruct, the problem's gone.
So we're sitting here in the lobby surrounded by photos of FMS events that have been hosted around the world, really. What would the Gray Cook have to say about this? Would you have believed all this?
One small part of me did, which is, I guess, what's allowed us to weather all the storms. I think the thing I'm most proud of is I always thought if I could keep our core team together, this is totally possible. The professions that touch movement were ready for a change. And I think when I started to write and talk about the way I was feeling about my profession and maybe what we could be doing better, I think I was saying exactly what a lot of people were already thinking. So I got enough feedback every step of the way to know we just got to keep holding this line. We got to let the principles drive it. We've got to do it right. We've got to systematize it. We can't get too cocky. We've got to be approachable. We've always got to prepare and do more with less. And the more we did, the more people said that's exactly the way I've been feeling, and you were the first to articulate it. So I want to make sure that everything we do, from a piece of software to a testing protocol, helps people see things clearer, because I know they're looking.
So that's 5 on 5 with Gray Cook. Next time we'll be catching up with our other co-founder, Lee Burton. If you have questions or comments, be sure to submit them in this post. And in the meantime, move well and move often.